Well, hello, and welcome to the TheMilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world-class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the TheMilVet Podcast. I am your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the honor and privilege today to be joined by fellow Marine Pat Nugent to talk about his story and what he has done in his transition story. For those that may not be familiar with what the TheMilVet does, TheMilVet is an executive platform for veterans that are looking to get into the private equity and venture capital space or founder space. If you are interested in those kind of roles, I encourage you to check out themilvet.org. We put on hiring events around the country. We have a newsletter. We do a podcast, and really just want to inform veterans that are interested in this kind of sometimes challenging space to break into about opportunities that exist in this private equity VC-backed space. Or if you're a company looking to hire veterans in this space, we'd love to talk to you as well. But today, we are here with Pat and on the podcast. And Pat, I would love to kind of give a quick intro and tell us what you're doing these days and what's going on.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Beau. Longtime listener, first-time caller. I am currently a management consultant, living and working in New York City for a firm called Boston Consulting Group, or BCG for those more familiar with the industry. And I actually just took transition, meaning consulting firms like a BCG and McKinsey, they'll actually give you time off to look for your next role. So I currently took transition. I have until January to find my next role, essentially. So really excited for the job prospects.
Awesome. Well, look forward to hearing about that, because I didn't know that actually existed. So we'll get
it's a selling point.
Let's start this whole thing from the beginning and your journey to get where you are now. I know you are a proud Citadel grad and had a great run there, but we'd love to hear kind of what was the impetus for you going to a military college or the military background for you? And obviously join the Marine Corps, see the flag in the background, obviously.
Yeah.
But we'd love to kind of hear your story about the Citadel and what was the impetus for you kind of embarking on your military career?
Sure. So I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. So unfortunately, that makes me a Cleveland Browns fan. And
I'm a Pink fan, so I can appreciate it. So.
Yeah. But growing up in Cleveland's not a big military town. So really my first exposure to the military, my grandfather served as a naval aviator, World War II. My dad served as a Marine towards the tail end of Vietnam. So growing up, we had this picture on our mantle. It had my grandfather in his uniform, my dad in his uniform, and then the third photo was blank. And I always envisioned that I would fill out that third photo from a young age. So when it came time to look for colleges in high school, I asked my dad, what are some schools besides Naval Academy, West Point? Because I was undecided if I wanted to go Army, Marines, Air Force. And he recommended the Citadel. I'd never heard of the Citadel before. Had a conversation with a grad the following week. He was a heck of a salesman. Citadel ended up being the only school that I applied to for undergrad. Yeah. But the real reason why not only I chose the Citadel, but the military in general, obviously the family lineage, so it's in my DNA. The second aspect was I graduated high school in 2009, and those were during the wars of Iraq and Afghanistan. And I lived a very privileged life up until that point and loved my country and wanted to do my part to give back. So for me, it was through military service. And then lastly, just the challenge to see if I had what it took to be in the military and see if I could lead Marines or lead soldiers, because at the time I wasn't sure what branch I was going to go into. So that's what ultimately led me to the Citadel.
No, I love it. And a similar story for me. I grew up in a middle-class family or upper middle-class family in New Orleans, Catholic high school. My dad had been an enlisted Marine. I'm like, I'm going to give this Marine Corps thing a shot and see how it works out. And 25 years later, it worked out pretty good. But, I had no,
totally.
You don't know. I think you all want to test yourself and also have that feeling of just, patriotism, want to do something for your country, and that opportunity to do that is always a part of it. I think for anybody that joins the service, and certainly you get that in spades at the Citadel. You jump right into it there. I mean, and for those that, I mean, I think I've talked to a lot of folks on the podcast, but those that don't know, a little more about the Citadel. What percentage of folks that graduate from there actually go into the military? It's not. I mean, it's not everyone. I know you can come as a regular student, right? So just give me a little kind of recap of life at the Citadel, and how many folks kind of go on from there to make military careers.
Sure. Yeah. So only about 30 to 40% actually go military, which I found shocking when I got there. I thought the majority went military, but the ones that don't go military, the reasons everybody's like, well, why would you go to the Citadel if you don't go military? A lot of it's legacy. So their grandfather went, their father went. A lot of it is if they want to live and work in the South, the Citadel has a huge alumni network. So very easy to get a job and stay engaged in that respect. And then the military route is you can choose any of the branches of service, and you can choose the officer route or the enlisted route, to where, if you go to a Naval Academy, if you go to an Air Force Academy, you're kind of stuck with that military branch. But if you're uncertain, like I was, I wanted to see if I would be more drawn towards the Marine Corps or more drawn towards the Army, because I knew I wanted to go infantry. And as we know, those are the only two branches that offer an infantry component.
And you said something I had no idea. Is it you? So you could theoretically go to the Citadel and then enlist in the Marine Corps, or you can go enlist.
Totally.
Is that
so?
I
So
didn't know that was a thing. Honestly,
yeah, it's not super common, but I had friends and peers that did. But the primary reason was if they wanted to pursue special operations. So if they wanted to be
SEAL or something like that, or Marside, they would yeah.
totally
It makes sense why you would do that, but I didn't even know that was an option. I don't think it is an option out of the Naval Academy. You have to
no, yeah,
yeah. Interesting. That's pretty cool. But everybody's in the Corps Cadets, right? I mean, you have to do all that for 4 years, whether you go in the military or not. But
totally.
you came in on a naval scholarship, or why? Again, yeah, yeah.
So I actually didn't. I didn't know what NROTC was until I got to the Citadel. Yeah, I didn't know anything about it. So I showed up day one, and you have to take an ROTC class, but I didn't apply for the NROTC scholarship my high school year. And it was through my first year after I assessed, okay, which branch did I want to pursue, the Marine Corps or the Army? Then I was like, okay, I really want to do the Marine Corps. And that meant that I needed to submit an NRC application to get the scholarship, because I was entertaining the idea of doing the NROTC route or the PLC route, because at the time scholarships were very, very difficult to get. They only awarded a few each year to the Citadel. So I wanted to keep my options open. And so I applied for both. And fortunately for me, my sophomore year, I earned the NROTC scholarship.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what would you say? I mean, obviously very formative years at the Citadel. I mean, what did you take away from that set you up for success, in the Marine Corps, afterwards, right? I mean, again, obviously you knew you wanted to be in. I mean, it's not the same as the Marine Corps, but it's obviously a military
Totally.
school. So, and what do you think were the foundational things that you got from your time at the Citadel that set you up for success moving forward?
For me, it's primarily leadership training. And you're in this leadership lab for 4 years. And I would argue one of the hardest forms of leadership is leading your peers. Because once you get to the Marine Corps, you're not leading your peers. But at the Citadel, you have to lead individuals that, number one, might not be going into the military. So how do you get them to buy into your vision of what you want? And number two, they're your same age as well. So those years were very, very difficult, but very informative, because I was able to tweak my leadership tool set, if you will. And the Citadel also offers, throughout your 4 years, you can enroll in different leadership ranks, which allow you to get exposure from an early age on, leading. You could be a squad leader at the Citadel. You can be a company commander, so you're in charge of like 100 of your peers. Or my senior year, I was fortunate enough to get the position Regimental Commander. So I was the number one cadet out of the 2,100 students at the time. So just being the face of the school, knowing that everybody was looking to you, and you pretty much had to be making a good impression.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously walking in a fishbowl when you're in those kind of roles, right? Everybody's looking at you, so you have no very little margin for error. But did you say you as a student, you volunteer for some of those roles in your
Sure. So
yeah, okay, yeah.
what I vaguely know about the federal academies like West Point and Naval Academy, everybody pretty much gets a role from sophomore year onwards. Freshman year, you're pretty much just in followership mode, so learning from sophomores, juniors, and seniors. At the Citadel, if you really want to, you could be what we call a private, so have no rank, no responsibilities all your 4 years, and
Mhm.
you essentially just go to classes and do your own homework. But if you want to be in a leadership position in the Corps Cadets, because we have the saying, the Corps leads the Corps, from a young age, such as your sophomore year, you can be in charge of like a fire team. To your junior year, you can be in charge of a squad. To all the way up to your senior year, you can be in charge of an entire company or an entire battalion.
Got it. No, that's pretty cool. Well, obviously
Yeah,
you
it's
did
very
great.
cool.
You finished number one in the class there, or had that role, which I assume translated well into the Marine Corps and on. I mean, you knew you wanted to be a grunt, and that was just no guarantee when you go to
Totally.
basic school, but that obviously worked out for you as well. And what was, I mean, what were your highlights for your Marine Corps time? I mean, you obviously had a good run there, got what you wanted. Did you get what you wanted out of it at the end of the day, or talk about your experience in the Marine Corps?
Yes and no, I would say. I was very fortunate I got infantry. At the basic school, not everybody gets their top choice. Infantry for me was my top choice. And I got my top choice for duty station. So I was stationed in Camp Pendleton. I was with 1st Battalion, 5th Marines, as you see there on the guide on. Uh, so starting off, great start. First deployment was on the 31st MU. So those unfamiliar with the Marine Corps, it's to Southeast Asia, essentially the crisis response force there. While we were over there, we were pretty much training with the South Korean Rock Marines and doing other bilateral training exercises. So not the combat, right, that I was hoping to experience. And then I get back from that deployment, get promoted to company executive officer. I really wanted to be a cap platoon commander because I wanted to stay in a platoon commander role. But if you stay in a platoon commander role, you just don't get that added responsibility of being an executive officer. So unfortunately / fortunately, I was executive officer. I actually learned the most from being an executive officer.
Yeah.
I underestimated the role and impact that you can have. And this time we had 13 months before our next deployment, which we were going to go to North Africa, the Middle East, as a part of that crisis response force. But this is where my career took an unexpected turn. So it was 5 days into this deployment on a platoon live fire training mission to where I was with the maneuver element and I sustained a gunshot wound. And the bullet fractured in me my left pelvis. It ripped through my small and large intestines. It lodged in my right hip. And I immediately fell forward, face the ground. I had no idea what was going on because it's a training mission, not expecting to get shot. And the medic sprints over, assesses my wound, and the next words out of his mouth were words I didn't want to hear. He said, "Hey, sir, you got shot, but I can't find an exit wound. And if you get shot, you want the bullet to go in and out. But where it hit me, it was wreaking all types of internal damage." And after he said that, my stomach started to swell, like I was 9 months pregnant. The pain was just unbearable. The only way that I can describe it to folks is just imagine somebody has a blowtorch on your entire lower body, just unrelenting. And as the executive officer of the company, right? Because Marines were taught you can't really cry, you can't yell, you can't scream because you're the officer, you're the person in charge. Luckily for me, my Marines went right into gear. They called up the medevac because we were chasing the golden hour. And, within 20 minutes, the Black Hawk lands. My Marines carry me to the LZ and I get on the helicopter once I'm away from my Marines and I grab the medic on board. I'm like, "Doc, you need to give me something for this pain. It is unbearable." And he just gives me this shot in my left shoulder. I'm like, "What was that?" He's like, "Oh, this is fentanyl. It should do the trick." And I wait a minute, wait 2 minutes, 5 minutes, nothing. I'm like, "Doc, this isn't doing anything for the pain." He's like, "That's all I'm authorized to give you, sir." So it was in that moment to where I had to repeat to myself 3 words. I was like, "All right, find a way to stay awake, find a way to stay awake." Because for me, I thought if I closed my eyes, if I went unconscious, that, my body would stop fighting. And this is not the way that I wanted to go out. So landed the next level of medical care. And I wake up a few days later in a coma with the prognosis that, never going to walk again. never going to go to the bathroom. That's number one or number two. And then never going to have children.
Damn, that is
Yeah.
crazy. Where were you when this happened? Where were you training?
So we were in Hawaii. So on the Big Island. So the training area is called PTA.
Yep.
Yeah. And so for the deployment, the Navy ships were going to leave from San Diego and stop in Hawaii to refuel. And my company commander was like, let's just go to Hawaii while the ships are en route. Let's do some training. Ships will pick us up and we'll go on the deployment. So that's where my company was. We were over in Hawaii while the ships were in transit. And then that's when the injury happened.
That is crazy. Well, that is definitely a massive career pivot from there.
Yes.
But obviously there's a good side to the story, and now you are obviously
Totally.
and doing pretty well. I mean, I just think about what was that like physically, I know it's hard, but it had to be almost worse, mentally, right? I mean, you're on deployment, you've been training up 13 months. I mean, you're almost there, your unit's ready to go. And then all of a sudden, not only is that gone, but your career, your life, not your life, but life it changed dramatically that day. I mean,
for sure.
How did you push through that? I mean, what gave you the strength to do that? I mean, for folks that, again, obviously all of us have career transitions in life. Yours is way more harsh and immediate than most. I mean, what did you do, or what do you attribute your ability to push through that to?
Yeah, for me, I'm a radical optimist by nature, which is a good and bad thing. So initially it was, okay, I need to get back in the fight. I need to get back to my Marines because this is a 7-month deployment. I got injured like day 5. So let me see how quickly I can heal. So super optimistic at first. That was the primary driver in my recovery. But then on one of my surgeries at Walter Reed, so the biggest injury that I had, so I had an ostomy, so it meant that my intestine was hanging out of my stomach. Then I had a severed right sciatic nerve. So I didn't know what a sciatic nerve was, but to simplify it, it's the biggest nerve in your lower body. You have one that goes down your left leg, one that goes down your right leg. It innervates your glute, your hamstring, your calf, your foot. So for me, my right sciatic nerve completely severed. The bullet just severed it completely. So from my knee down, completely paralyzed, like can't move my foot up or down, side to side, don't have any hamstring function. The only muscle that works is my quad. So I got sent to Walter Reed. Walter Reed's in Bethesda, Maryland, top military hospital. They had this top nerve specialist, went to Harvard Medical School. He comes to my room. He's like, listen, I want to perform this experimental surgery on you to give you a chance at a full recovery. I'm like, what's that going to entail? He's like, we're going to open you up and try to reconnect the nerve where we're severed and then have it regenerate on its own and then theoretically lead to a full recovery. So I was super pumped about this. And it's supposed to be this 12-hour surgery. The doctor goes in a cadaver lab like the weekend before practicing the surgery. And Monday comes, I get wheeled into surgery, get wheeled out. I look at the clock on the wall. It's only been like an hour. I'm like, okay, this surgery is supposed to be 12 hours. What's going on? And doctor comes in, his head's down. He's like, listen, I got some bad news. Surgery was unsuccessful. The nerve was severed too close to your spinal column, and we didn't want to risk permanently paralyzing you. So we're going to have to figure out what your new normal kind of looks like. So it was at that point to where I was like, okay, this injury is now permanent in nature. The odds that I stay in the Marine Corps extremely low because at the time, General Mattis was Secretary of Defense, and there was a new policy of only 2 periods of limited duty. So for those unfamiliar, period of limited duty is like 6 months to like heal. It was not unheard of during the height of the wars. Individuals get 6, 7, 8-year periods of limited duty just because some recoveries were just that long and that intense. But, if I was not able to be deployable in 12 months, I kind of had to get put on a medical board. So therefore, I saw my writing on the wall. And what made it a little bit easier to swallow was the fact that, if I stayed in, I'd be a liability, not necessarily an asset. Like, sure, I could maybe stay in, but if I stayed in, I wouldn't be able to pass the physical fitness test. I wouldn't be able to go on missions or operations. There was a time where we were entertaining the idea of potentially different MOS, but I don't know. I'm stubborn. If I wasn't doing infantry, then I didn't want to stay in. So got put on the medical review board. Had no idea what I wanted to do because I had orders to go to assessment and selection for MARSOC after that deployment.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to stay in the Marines for 20 years. Like, never envisioned on getting out. If I got out, I was like, okay, I'll do like CIA, FBI, some sort of like field agent. But all those were based on being able to physically do a job at a high level. And now that my physical ability is taken out, I can no longer pursue those paths. So I was like, I don't know what to do. And fortunately for me, I had peers that were just voluntarily getting out at the 5-6 year mark. They were going to grad school, and they were going to like Stanford, Columbia, Northwestern, all these top schools. Never in my mind was I like, oh, I can go to some of these top schools. But they proved to me that, because you compare yourself to your friends, your peers, I was like, okay, well, if this person could get in here, like maybe I have a chance. So I went all in on grad school. Like, I remember at Walter Reed studying for, it's called the GRE, the graduate test. And I was studying in the hospital bed. I had to take it 5 times before I got a good enough score to entertain the idea of applying to these top grad schools, and was fortunate to get into Wharton School of Business for my MBA. And then I did the dual degree at Harvard Kennedy School for public policy.
Man, that is a significant pivot, obviously, but impressive in its own right. Just to keep, again, I think just to keep mentally focused and sharp. And again, you've had some pretty serious doors close on what you thought you were going to do, obviously, from a Marine Corps career, with the opportunity to go to MARSOC and who knows what. That's rough. Again, I know the physical part and recovery was hard, but I can only imagine, the mental part of it is equally, if not more challenging for you. But again, to push through that and to figure it out and you say, okay, one door is closed, but I'm going all in for something else. And then to pick the best of the best, right? To go to the Wharton and to go to the Harvard, the public policy piece of it is pretty impressive. So did you know what you wanted to do with that? Or was it something you wanted to get there and just kind of like, all right, I'm going to business school and I'm going to figure out what I do from there? Or did you have any type of at least in your head, what you thought you would do with that, vice what the reality was? Did you kind of know where you wanted to go with that?
Sure. So I think it's a little bit of both. When you're applying to these grad school programs, you have to have a narrative. Like, what are your short-term goals? What are your long-term goals? Like, why get this degree? Like, why now? For me, it was really easy because the why now was like I'm getting medically retired. Yeah. But I had to think of like, okay, well, if I get this graduate degree, like, what am I going to do with it? So for me, public service has always run deep. My dad's a federal judge in Cleveland. My mom's a special victims advocate for the Cleveland Police Department. I loved my time in the Marine Corps. I loved being a part of something that was bigger than myself. So like, okay, so the long-term goal for me was always public service in some capacity. But in order to be the most effective public servant, in my mind, I needed to have a life and career in business because I had the military experience, but I didn't have the business experience. And that's where the MBA came in. The MBA was more like the short-term goal right after graduate school. And that's why I chose consulting. I was between consulting and investment banking, 2 very common paths for veterans. But I felt that if I went investment banking route, I'd be pigeonholed into careers in finance. Not technically true, but that's my belief from talking to folks. And then consulting just offered a wider array of exit opportunities, as well as the ability to be on a wide array of projects. Like in my 2 years at BCG already, like my first year, I did private equity projects. So a lot of due diligences where I just learned a lot in a short time frame. And then my second year, I was doing all of our federal work with the military and government. So felt like I got a really good experience. That's why I'm looking to take the next step after year 2. So those are kind of the ways I thought about it.
And how did you, what was your process of, I mean, again, your transition process was obviously relatively pretty straightforward. You had no choice. It was a medical separation, obviously, and went right to school. So that piece was, say, a smooth transition, but it was kind of a somewhat linear transition. As you went through the transition from, getting your degree, did you interview with a bunch of places? You said consulting. It's kind of that just was kind of your thing. Did you know? I mean, was BCG on your radar, or did you talk to the McKinsey? I'm just curious how that.
Sure.
Why was that a right fit for you, and kind of how that come about?
Yeah, I had no idea what consulting was until I got to grad school. I didn't know who McKinsey was. I didn't know what BCG was. Yeah. And then I get there, and everybody's like, If you go consulting, like these are the firms that you need to apply to. I mean, a huge selling point for me for having BCG as one of my top choices is they do both private sector and public sector work, and I knew I wanted to do both. My first year, I told myself I would do only private sector work. That's why I just did a lot of diligence work, did a lot of consumer work, and then after I did that for a year, I was like, okay, now I want to see what it's like from the federal side outside of uniform, and that's what drew me into it, as well as being able to just work on a team. I don't really like working independently if I can be part of a team, because every consulting project you're on a team, which I really liked and really appreciated.
Got it. No, it sounds like it obviously worked out well for you. Then, and just talk about, for those that don't know what consulting, I mean, I think everybody in their head has an idea of consulting. And to me, it's always like the guy that came in with a bunch of like sticky notes and took some PowerPoint slides and came back 90 days later and all jacked up. Pays $1 million for a fixed process. Like, what did that mean to you on a nuts and bolts level for somebody who do consulting? What's that like? What did you like about it, or have you liked about it? What's the day to day?
Sure. So I'll talk you through like a diligence project, because those are the ones that I did the most of. And so essentially a private equity firm comes to BCG and they're like, we're looking to make a major investment in this company. Can you assess this company for us? So for BCG, we will look at it in a few ways. First way is we'll look at it at the overall market. How, is it growing? Is it not growing? We'll look at the risks of the market. Next thing we'll look at is competitive analysis. So who are the competitors in the space? What are they doing well? How's everybody differentiated? The next thing we'll do is the customer analysis. So what does the customer think of this brand or this company, and how can they improve? And then lastly, it's the growth levers. So if they did make an investment with this firm, like how can they grow? Is it through more product lines? Is it through going internationally? So the way this works at like a tactical level, every consultant or associate will be assigned what we call like a module. So there'd be one person that's working solely on the market, another person working solely on the customer analysis, another person on the competitive analysis, and then another person on the growth levers. And then overall seeing the project is what we call a project leader. And then there's partners higher up who are on multiple projects, but come in to provide strategic guidance every now and then. And then every day essentially is you have a morning stand-up, so like a morning meeting, could be at 9 a.m., roughly around 15 minutes of what your priorities are for the day. And if you have any things that you need help with from either other team members or your project leader, and then you go about your day, and then you have a checkout, typically 5 p.m., maybe 6 p.m., and then you talk about what you did for the day, what your plan is for that evening, because consulting, you don't end at 5 or 6 p.m., especially if you're doing a diligence. It's not unheard of that you work until midnight or 1 a.m. So another reason why I only did it for a year, it's just not that sustainable, but you learn a lot. Like most projects are anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks, and it's an absolute sprint the entire time. But it's worth it because you learn a lot. So as long as you have a good reason of like why you're doing it, which mine was, I'm in full learning mode. Like I'm right out of grad school. I just want to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be. I mean, you're obviously starting at the bottom, so to speak, and you have to get out there and learn this. And it's a whole new world, I'm sure, for someone coming from the military. But what would you say that having that military perspective maybe brought to the team that was different than your peers that were not military? What was the advantages of having? I'm sure there's disadvantages too, because you didn't maybe have a traditional, I don't know, job. A lot of guys probably had other jobs maybe before they joined, or I don't know. But I mean, what would you say were the positives that you brought that maybe others didn't have? And what was your added value maybe as a veteran specifically?
Sure. I would say number one would be the tolerance for pain. If you work until midnight or 1 a.m., it's not the worst thing in the world if you're able to like Uber Eats your food and like not have to worry about like the creature comforts. So pain was relative. Like I got to go home and sleep in my bed every night. I got to have food expensed. Like tolerance for pain, as well as like working hard. As long as I knew that. Another thing would be expectation management. So if I knew that the day was going to go until midnight or 1 a.m., then if I got off at 11, it would be a huge win. The next thing that I would say would be attitude, for sure. because if you're working this hard, it's very easy to get discouraged. It's very easy to get flustered, and just being a calm presence for the team, having that positive mental attitude as we preach in the Marines, because emotional contagion is a very, very real thing. So if you're stressed, if you're flustered, like the other team members are going to be that way, but vice versa. If you're cool, calm, collected, positive, then that's just going to be contagious to everybody else on the team. So trying to figure out where I fit, because at the time I was just an individual contributor, which totally foreign to me, because in the Marine Corps, I was never an individual contributor. So that took a little bit of adjustment, because there were certain times where I wanted to step up and lead, but I couldn't, because that wasn't necessarily my role, and I didn't want to undermine the project leader on the team.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, having done a bunch of these podcasts, when a lot of veterans finish up their MBAs, and they get to their, whether it's on Wall Street or whether it's in consulting, it's like, just figuring out where to be a value add, right? Being willing to do windows, do all the things, all the intangibles, because again, I think if you're not a veteran, maybe you kind of have a expectation of what you should do and kind of say, oh, that's not my job. But where a veteran's like, I don't know any better. I'm going to do it all and figure it all out, to make myself invaluable to someone, because you never know where that opportunity is going to come by, doing something that doesn't seem abnormal to a military person, but maybe would to a veteran. Well, why are you doing it? Well, it's just, that's nobody else is doing it. I'm taking the garbage out, or whatever. Like, make that analogy.
Totally. Or making sure that my project leader has food, because in the Marine Corps, the best staff NCOs were the ones that made sure that the leaders were eating. And I knew a lot of times when it's a stressful day, like the last thing my project leader is going to think about is food. So just making sure that you order food for them, because they're in meetings the entire day. So simple things like that that your leader can benefit from.
I love it. I mean, little things add up like that, and then they start to rely on you more and more, and probably the opportunities from there grow and beyond that. And so those projects, but I mean, that's a full sprint for 2 to 4 weeks. You said basically it could last that long. Did that totally. For a year. I guess you figured out that was learned. I'm sure you learned a ton, but decided you wanted to pivot into what was the next role you took? What piece of the pie did you have then?
So same, I was an individual contributor. So similar to, how the Marine Corps works. Every 2 years, you kind of go to your next rank. I was still a consultant in year 2, but this time, instead of in the private equity practice, I was in the federal practice. So working with the federal government, the military, but still an individual contributor, but just different sorts of projects.
And is just as stressful as the federal space? I feel in my head the federal space be a little slower than the PE space, but I could.
It is no. It is a little slower. You're not working till midnight or 1 a.m. most nights, but you are traveling more. So one of the perks with the private equity practice was I was in New York City the entire time. So I lived a 15-minute walk away, so I can walk to work, walk home. But federal practice, I was traveling Monday through Thursday. So not ideal, but especially when you're traveling to a place that has to make a connection flight. Yeah. But you make do, because you're flying in a nice class.
Roger that. Well, and now, and at this point, you are looking to make the next move, into doing something else. I mean, talk about that. I mean, what have you kind of learned that you feel like you've learned all you want to learn in consulting, or what's next? What's on the horizon for you as you have this? And I guess talk to me a little bit about the opportunity that BCG gives employees to look for their next role. That's pretty cool that they're cool with it. Like all right, yeah, I mean,
sure.
You work your butt off for us. We're going to give you a smooth kind of off ramp. So I'd love to just kind of talk about what that looks like, and maybe what you're looking to do as you move forward too.
Sure. So I've been at BCG 2 years, and if you've been there for 2 years, you either get 2 months full pay or 4 months half pay to figure out your next transition. And I don't know if they explicitly say this, but I believe the reason why they do it is because they want you to leave with a good taste in your mouth of BCG, as well as hire BCG, because folks that work at BCG typically end up in the C-suite of companies later on in their careers. So they want to be the ones that hire BCG once they're in those positions. And I decided to take the 4 months because I wanted to spend the first month or two just really being intentional about who I talk to and what my next step is, because it's going to be pivotal. I'm 34 at the time, so I need this next step to be very strategic and like aligned with what I want to do for long-term goals and whatnot. And I took it 2 weeks ago, so I still have some time. And I've just been really talking to folks, a lot of veterans who are in industries or spaces that I want to pivot to. And for me, 2 years was the right amount of time, because a lot of folks, if they stay for 2 or 3 years, they're really doing it to get that project leader time. So, AKA the leadership time, because I was just an individual contributor for 2 years. But most veterans leave at the 2 year mark because they've had that leadership experience through their military service. But a lot of folks, this is their first opportunity for leadership experience at the project leader level at a place like BCG, to where, the first time they manage a team is, 4 to 5 individuals.
Got it. No, that's interesting. Again, that's always the beauty of the veteran, right? At age 22, you were leading, 50 guys, 30 guys, and had a budget of $1 million, and these folks are 34 and have never, or 30, and have never led anybody yet, So there are very much differences, I think, on what a veteran can bring to the table from that leadership, be able to lead up and lead down. And obviously, and then add on top of that, the MBA experience. So you have the book piece of it, in addition to the real world piece of it that you can add. There's got to be, I assume, something that BCG values. I don't know how many veterans are there, but I assume that is most folks talk to, definitely, if they think about it, like, makes sense. But it is nice to be able to bring that to the table, the leadership piece, in addition to the regular skill set, obviously. So pretty sweet, good stuff.
Totally.
And so, but what do you know what's next, or what are you thinking about? I'm just curious. If we talk to Pat in 3 years from now, what are you doing? I'm just curious. What's the perfect? In general, kind of role are you looking for? What's next?
Sure. So I'm pursuing right now more public speaking. So originally, after my injury and throughout graduate school, I was receiving inbounds from companies and educational institutions to just share my story. And it wasn't until my second year at BCG to once I started receiving more inbounds for that, and just sharing my story of grit, resilience, and leadership, and just seeing the impact that it's been having on the individuals and audiences that I've spoken to. I'm looking to do more of that in the next year, but also getting back into public service. So I've applied for a few fellowships and just waiting to hear back, and ideally starting those up in January based on the results.
Well, that's awesome. No, how have you managed just the physical rehab piece of it too? Is that still something sounds like when you're working, 18-hour, 16-hour days, it's probably not the greatest for your body.
Totally.
Been through a traumatic experience. Have you been okay? Have you physically been able to manage that? You're full up round these days, so to speak. I'm just want to make
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I was in grad school, the one thing I really loved about the military Marine Corps is it had that physical component, and that's something that I just really missed. And it was early on in my recovery, once I was on a medical board and I was in physical therapy. My physical therapist saw that I was a little bit depressed, and she asked what was wrong. I said, I'm in physical therapy, but I have no mission. I have no goal. I'm just here. And she mentioned the Invictus games, and I had never heard of the Invictus games before. And, for those that don't know, the Olympics, hopefully the Paralympics. Think of the Invictus games as just the Paralympics, but it's for wounded service members. From right now, it's about 25 nations. Started by Prince Harry. It's every 2 years. So they have like rowing, powerlifting, track, field. So she mentions that. And, I could barely walk at the time. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get selected for the Invictus games. Like, these people going to compete in the Paralympics and I can barely walk. She's like, so she pretty much posed it as a challenge for me. And this was in 2017. And I made it my goal to try to get selected for Team USA for the Invictus games. And, flash forward a few years, I get selected to compete in 2023 for Team USA in Dusseldorf, Germany. But I had to balance that training while at Wharton, while at Harvard, while all this stuff, while trying to get a job, all this stuff was going on. So being able to balance it during that lended itself perfectly to when I got to consulting. And, I just figured out the best way to do it is first thing in the morning. And knowing that I don't need to work out 7 days a week for 2 hours, like just trying to have what I call a floor and a ceiling. So like my floor for me, so like the thing I'll do on my busiest day, if I work till 1 or 2 a.m., is like I can always do 100 push-ups, I can always do 100 squats, and I can always do 100 sit-ups. That's like my floor. But then my ceiling, typically Saturdays and Sundays, it's like a 2 to 3 hour workout, right? Hour weights, hour cardio, sauna, cold plunge. That's reserved for like the weekends. But just having that simple trick that I learned from a buddy of like, hey, what's your floor every day? And then what's your ceiling? And especially when you're traveling, because you don't need to have a full weight set to get a workout in.
I love that. I've never heard it said that way, of having your daily floor and ceiling of what you do, but just to be doing something to keep yourself consistent and to hold yourself accountable every day is pretty awesome. As a guy that travels pretty much, something I probably do a better job of myself, because I can definitely, you can always find an excuse not to work out, especially when you're on the road, so
Totally.
Great stuff. And you're still, you plan on competing, are you still involved with the Invictus Games?
So as a USA athlete, you only have 2 opportunities. So I did mine in 2023. So I can technically do it again. I'm entertaining the idea of it again, but I'm also entertaining the idea of potentially making a 2028 Paralympic run. So more on that later, but TBD. But I still do, I still stay active. So I do high rocks, if you're familiar. It's the new craze these days. So think of CrossFit, but essentially more inclusive. It's the same workout. It was started in Germany. It's a fitness endurance race. So it's 8 different stations ranging from sled push, sled pull, burpee broad jumps, farmer carries, and between each, it's a 1,000-meter run. So 5 miles total, 8 stations, takes the elite athletes an hour, takes the average athletes 2 hours. And it's something that I've caught the bug, and they have an adaptive category. Since I have a prosthetic below my right leg, I qualify for the adaptive division. So they're just starting that up. And that's been something that has helped me when I'm training, because it's difficult for me to get the motivation if I'm just training for the beach, because I don't go to the beach too often.
Well, that's awesome. I was fortunate during my time at Amazon. We sponsored the Warrior Games.
Oh, nice.
Often here at Disney, and we actually had guys go out to the Invictus Games as well. So certainly very familiar with that. But I know it takes a lot and a lot of commitment to do that. So good for you to still be pursuing that. And I actually had, I had a Marine on the podcast not too long ago, Rowie T-Jack. She's actually still active duty, and she's training for the Winter Olympics in the bobsled while she's
good for her.
Full active.
Oh, wow.
Duty. So again, it's amazing what some people can do to find the time. I mean, you can do it. Anybody can do it. It's not easy, but I mean, you've obviously proven that. You've come back through some amazing, setbacks to have a career that's, I say, amazing career. I just started your career, and I can't wait to see what's next and how that all works out. I need to connect you up with some friends of mine on the public speaking side too. I'd love to do that. That's great. Well,
sure.
As we get ready to wrap up, I mean, what advice would you share with transitioning veterans that are looking to get into the consulting space in general? I think there's a lot of folks that they have a general idea of what that is, or just for into this the bigger maybe PE space in general too, because you know what that takes and what that's all about. I mean, for folks that are out there listening to the podcast, what are the words of wisdom you have from a guy that has had a very nonlinear career to get to where you are? Will you share with our audience?
Sure. So a few things come to mind. First thing would be to not self-select, meaning aim high and have them tell you no. So if you would have told me that I would be going to Harvard and Wharton in grade school and high school, I would have laughed in your face, because I wouldn't have thought it was possible, because I was like an ABC student in high school. And college, I did a little bit better, but not Harvard worthy in my opinion. But I wanted Harvard to tell me no. I didn't want myself to tell me no. So don't self-select. And this goes to a lot of different things, whether it's applying for a job, right? Like, I don't think BCG is going to take me. I don't think McKinsey is going to take me. But like, let them tell you. Don't self-select yourself. Second thing I would say would be to find a veteran and a non-veteran mentor. So I was very, very fortunate that, at least from my experience, I noticed that when I spoke to veterans who had been in consulting, who had been in certain industries or sectors that I wanted to, they would tell me straight up how it is, like no BS. They would be like, this is, if you want to pursue this path, you can, but like, this is what it takes. So they wouldn't give me the sales pitch. They'd be like, this is what it takes. You're going to be working till 1 a.m. You're going to be traveling a lot, so on and so forth. As long as you're willing to endure that, then that's super helpful. But then also finding the non-veteran allies, because once I got to New York in consulting, most consultants, at least for BCG, that are veterans, they're out of the DC office. So I was one of only like a handful of veterans in the New York office. So it's like, okay, if I want to like have a good experience here, I need to find non-veteran mentors. So that's where I went off on my own and kind of deviated, be like, hey, when I would reach out to folks, I'd be like, listen, there's not that many veterans in senior positions here. Would you be willing to like, meet with me once a quarter, or like whatever it was? That was very, very beneficial for me. And then thirdly would be to find a way to give back to the veteran community, because the only reason why I'm here with you today is because the veterans that came before me, that opened up doors that I didn't even think were possible, whether that was, our mutual friend, Brendan Aronson, of willing to talk to me about Wharton, because Wharton wasn't even on my radar. And then he sold me on Wharton, end up at Wharton. And then the reason why I pursue consulting is because a lot of the veterans that I looked up to and admired, who were second years at the time, went consulting. And then even now to this day, when I'm looking at my next steps post-consulting, who are the veterans I admire, who are the veterans I respect, I reach out to them. And again, don't self-select. Like I've reached out to a lot of veterans who you might not think would look at a LinkedIn DM, but they look at the LinkedIn DM, they respond, they give you 10, 15 minutes of their time. And that has been very, very beneficial for me.
That's all. That's some great advice. And again, I think I love that about don't self-select. I think we do get, so many folks get some kind of imposter syndrome. Like, I can't do that. I don't belong with those. I mean, you do. You belong. That's what this podcast. We have folks every day on this podcast, or every week, that have done amazing things that never, you wouldn't think from where they started to where they end up. But you can't be afraid to put yourself out there. You can't be afraid to fail. And learn from your failure, right? I mean, we're all going to have those doors closed, but if you're willing to bet on yourself, I think that's what the biggest thing you hear in these podcasts over and over is, your willingness to bet. I believe in me more than anybody else. I think I can do it. You got to just put all the noise out of your head and just go for it. If you do that, and the veteran network is so powerful. I mean, your point is so spot on about reaching out to people you don't know that have been there before you, because I think we all want to send the elevator back down and help those guys that are behind us, because transition is scary, and you've had one of the scariest transitions there is, and been super successful. And I really appreciate your story. I appreciate your time, and I'm excited to see what comes next for you. And yeah, we'll have to re-engage in a few years and hopefully see you in the Olympics in 2028, man. It's good stuff. Thanks again for that. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Beau.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram at TheMilVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@TheMilVet.org. Thank you so much and take care.